I'm Dan Hamilton, Marine Corps veteran and host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and our dedicated staff at the Texas Veterans Land Board. Here every Monday on the Next Gen Warrior Show, we are proud to bring you the success stories and the achievements of veterans after they leave the military. Joining me today is Mike Nemeth. He is the founder of Emblem Athletic, as well as a West Point graduate. Mike, it's great to have you on the program today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Absolutely. So let me ask you about this. I know we have a lot of content to get into. I'm excited to talk about building a business and talk about entrepreneurship and the path that led you to found Emblem Athletic. But let's talk about your military service. I said that you are a West Point graduate. So tell us about when you joined the military and what you did while you were in.
Sure. So I applied to West Point back in 1999. Went straight into West Point from high school. So I got there in 2000. Obviously, if anyone was around in 2000, it was a different world back then. So my first year at West Point was pretty uneventful, aside from the typical West Point adventures. September 11th happened my second year there at West Point. So that was certainly a pretty big mental game changer for everybody there. It certainly became real. I started. A friend of mine was killed in action, who was a couple years ahead of me. So I hadn't even graduated yet, and sort of had that experience of this, this being a real thing. My military career was absolutely opposite of what I expected it to be, and I think it's something that the more and more I talk more openly about it, the more I hear from other people who've had some similar experiences. But I did not do much in the military at all. I graduated from West Point in 2004, and then I was injured, and I was put on a med. It was Army purgatory. I was in a med hold profile, and I was a lieutenant stuck in an S3 shop for a year doing random lieutenant things that nobody else wanted to do, which again is also something I've come to learn is perhaps more reflective of typical military service than I gave myself credit for. But that was it. And so, I think when you and I have talked a little bit ahead of this, I jokingly say sometimes people always say like, welcome so-and-so, highly decorated veteran. And I like to say I'm a highly undecorated veteran. I didn't have the chance to do much. And so that's how my service kind of career played out.
So let me ask you this then, when you have, an experience that didn't pan out maybe the way you wanted to, or you didn't feel like you got to fulfill some of the requirements or the vision that you had for yourself. When you left the service, how did you go about finding your footing after that, and where did you try to put yourself in order to make sure that you could continue to lead and continue to serve your community after you took off your uniform?
Yeah, very, very poorly. I didn't take it well. And I think, in hindsight, it was a pretty typical reaction, but I was pretty angry. So there's like a lost year post separation where I wanted nothing to do with anything. I didn't want to talk to any of my friends that were still in. I didn't want to have anything to do with the military. I was really angry and jaded. And if anyone who knows me, that is really quite the opposite of my usual demeanor. So I was in a funk for a while, and it was hard to appreciate kind of what I felt I was missing, which was part of being in a team and on a community and doing something meaningful. So I had some very unfulfilling jobs and some unfulfilling experiences post service for those really first couple years afterwards. And then I started finding my footing. Then I started getting connected in with friends from fellow West Point graduates, and that really helped me kind of change my perspective of, just because I'm not in doesn't mean I can't contribute. I can't do things that are meaningful for the nation, for fellow veterans. And so that it took me a while to get to that point, but now it's something I try to talk to as many people about, that like you can continue to serve after the military. And for most people, your military career ends with them asking you to leave. Right? Like at some point they're going to say, thanks for playing. It's time to go do something else. And so even if you're in for a full career, you're still leaving with plenty of your life ahead. You need to figure out how to continue to serve.
Yeah, I actually want to say, how much I appreciate your candid nature about your military service and maybe not living up to your expectations. Because one thing that I try to communicate to the veterans community, and I am proud, one thing I'm proud about at the show is that so many veterans from so many different types of service, military background, those who, we've had generals on the show all the way down to people like me who joined the Marine Corps and enlisted out of high school, and I think it's important for the veterans community to know, and for people in the armed forces to know that, like you pointed out, even if you did not maybe accomplish everything that you thought you would in the military, you can still have an incredible opportunity to continue to lead and serve in your community afterwards. And I felt the same exact way you did after I got out of the military, that I didn't feel like I had done enough. I felt like I was jaded. I was mad. I grew my hair out. I didn't want to talk to
Yeah.
anybody. I did that whole thing, like
Yeah.
put it
Here,
behind me,
yeah.
And I'm like you said, the more that you talk about it, I'm sure the more that you hear from people who have a similar reaction. And maybe, maybe that's a reaction too for some people who have incredible stellar careers, that they try to put a little bit of it's almost like an emotional barrier. I felt like I was putting an emotional barrier between like Sergeant Hamilton or Corporal Hamilton or, Lance Corporal Hamilton, and then who Dan was 6 months later or a year later. And that is, I think, a large part of the military transition, whether that time in the Marine Corps or that time in the military was incredibly eventful, or if it wasn't eventful, I do think people experience what you just talked about.
Yeah, it's funny. Even some of the most, in my opinion, distinguished careers, like all the things that you kind of envision when you talk to that person, they're like, oh, there's nothing, right? Like everyone always sort of sells it short, but and those words carry meaning. I think it doesn't matter what they did, they still feel like there's more to do. So it's a never ending trap we put ourselves into. Of always trying to do more.
Right. It's the desire to measure up, right? It's the desire, like if you're a Marine, everybody wants to be Chesty Puller. Everyone wants to be, that hero. But I think, the importance of the story that you have, and hopefully the experience that we can share today, is your continued service after the military, and your dogged pursuit of like, okay, I'm going to find something, I'm going to come back. Can you talk about the point where you realized you weren't in a place that you wanted to be, and what was the kind of the moment or the conversation or the relationships that pulled you back into a healthier place?
I mean, I had every layer of rough spot to be in, and I was in an unfulfilling work environment. I had a real unsupportive direct manager, leader, all those things. Like professionally, on the life wheel of 0 to 10, professional was at a solid 0. And I was just starting to find my footing sort of socially. I was starting to build some friendships and starting to see other people and realize they're not nearly as unhappy as I am. Maybe they figured something out. And so that's where I started looking at, getting into something different from a work standpoint. So I did go from a very unsatisfying job and world. I was living in New York City at the time. And then I felt like, well, let's look around. It seems like a lot of these, former military people work at defense contractors. I'm going to go work at Sikorsky Aircraft. And that was my first sort of step to get out of kind of the funk and the trap that I was in. And so I went and worked at Sikorsky. I did not work on military programs. Coincidentally, I worked on some of their civil programs. It was still fun to just kind of be back kind of a little bit in that environment. I did realize though that I had no business being an engineer. That was not like, I found at least I was in the right setting, but I am definitely in the wrong functional area. And it just takes time. It takes time to figure that stuff out. And I have no regrets about jumping into an engineering role at Sikorsky. And I tell a lot of people there is no wrong. There's no wrong move. I think people always get caught up in like trying to find the right job or make the right career decision. if you're not happy with it, if it doesn't work out, just continue to move on, right? So I did about a year at Sikorsky in this engineering position, and I just said, this still isn't right. It's better,
Yeah.
but I'm still gonna try to continue to improve, and that's what I did with some of the next decisions that I made.
So during that time frame, were you starting businesses? Were you doing things that would eventually kind of lead to you starting Emblem Athletic?
Yes and no. Mostly that I didn't even realize it. I just both my parents owned businesses when I was growing up, and so it was actually the first time that I'd had a sort of normal 9-to-5 job, and that was the problem for me. Is I didn't have any experience with that, and so I always had, quote, side hustles going before that was a thing. So I started.
What were some of those, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, for sure. Dude, they were some of the most ridiculous, terrible ideas you could imagine. But some of them worked, some of them didn't work. It was just a constant, constant evolution, constant learning process. Some of them I was very passionate about. I've done plenty of like West Point focused side projects. I've published books. I've done like kids' toys, some apparel side hustles, and that's where I started learning some things that ultimately led to Emblem. I did other ones that I had zero like passion for. I started a scarf company.
That's an interesting one.
I started it purely because I would look at these stores and see like, how the hell is that an $89 square piece of fabric? Like I could buy that for $1 and see if somebody will buy it for $89. So I built this completely, I mean, it was a real website. It sold luxury scarves. If I call them luxury, that means they're luxury, right? So I set this website up. I took some like awesome product photography, and I started running some Facebook ads. This is 10, 15 years ago, where Facebook ads were really super cheap. And I sold some scarves. And then I realized I have no interest in this whatsoever. So I shipped those scarves.
You don't have any of those behind you on the bookshelf right now. So where are the extra scarves?
So the scarves are in my house. I have 2 daughters and 2 young sons.
Yeah.
My daughters have like this giant box of scarves that they're constantly playing with. So I always joke that, you never know what the like unintended side effects of some of the products are. Right. So, but yeah, my daughters play with those, and I laugh every time I see them. I'm like, that's a $99 scarf you're playing with there.
She's got luxury attire on already.
Yes. So yeah, I always had those types of businesses kind of on the side, and I didn't even appreciate that I was sort of flexing that muscle and learning all the different pieces. But after Sikorsky, I still worked in the defense industry. It was just at a much smaller company. So I worked in the material science. It was a nanotech company. We did projects for DARPA and the Navy and all that kind of stuff. I did that for probably 7 years. And that's a great story of, it was a great team. I don't have any, I have a history degree. I have no idea. I still don't understand half the stuff that team worked on, but it was a great team. It was a great environment. And it was a great learning opportunity. Like I learned so much by working there, and that company eventually kind of sold in a very complex, messy transaction. It's never nearly as clean as people think it is from the outside.
Yeah. So I have to ask you the question. I think that there's a conversation that happens around entrepreneurship if you don't like your job, then you should quit your job and you should found one, you should make one, you should blaze your own trail. Yeah. There's the other side of the coin that says, hey, Mike, stay at Sikorsky or stay at wherever you are and just keep working part-time or keep working in the evenings to be able to develop the company. You took, I think, the second one, right? Which was, I'll keep working my 9 to 5 and then I'll do this on the weekends and I'll do this at night. Can you talk about maybe those conflicting narratives and why you chose one over the other?
What's our state policy on profanity Like, is this,
We can probably get away with one or two, but besides
you know,
that,
it's all right. I'll just say, let's just say a lot of, like, the idea of one size fits all is BS,
okay.
right? Like, because I found, if I'm really going to be transparent about my path, I did both, except I did both sort of in reverse. I was doing side hustles because I liked them. Like, because I had fun with them, not because I was trying to leave my job. Right. So, like, I know there's that narrative of, like, if you're not happy, quit and make it happen. Right. Just, take the leap and all the other sort of, like,
language, take the leap.
That language.
Yes.
I did not take the leap. I got kicked out of the building. I got fired. So that company that I worked for got bought, and in typical fashion, the new owners that eventually replaced the old team with their team. So I thought I've been doing everything right. I thought I've got this great, I've done this great career. I've accomplished all this stuff professionally. And then I found myself unemployed. Like, and that was only 4 years ago. That was as dark of a time as it was for me post service time. Like, I mean, there were some real moments. And again, now I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got mortgage, I've got like life going on, and the paycheck stopped. And I didn't know how to face that. Like, from my own sense of accomplishment of, like, have I failed? Right. Like, I didn't tell people that I got fired because I was too embarrassed about it. And so I started applying for some jobs,
right, and kind of questioning. You start questioning yourself, the path you take, and you question.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's not a fun spot to be in. And I've talked to a couple people about, just even, and we'll talk about LinkedIn a little bit. There isn't a it's complicated status on LinkedIn. You're always supposed to be in a bucket. And so after I got fired, I said, "Oh, I'm a consultant now." And so I updated my LinkedIn profile to say, like, I'm a consultant. But that wasn't true. I didn't have any consulting clients. And the people that I was perhaps consulting for, I really wanted them to hire me. Like, I'm looking for a job, but I wasn't open about it. So I spent about another year, like, trying to make ends meet. And I realized that what was carrying me through in two ways, financially and emotionally, were my side hustles. Like all of a sudden, some of these, like, little side, t-shirt projects or whatever else, that was like the $1,000 that allowed me to pay the mortgage that month or stuff like that. So Emblem is actually the third iteration of trying to make it work. It was not nearly as clean of a path that most people like to think of, like, oh, I was in my job, but I was unhappy, and so I'm just going to instantly start a business.
Right.
It's messy.
And that's kind of, I'm glad that you kind of took us on that journey, because there is that narrative of just, jump off the cliff and just, go head first or whatever. But I think from a lot of the entrepreneurs that we talk to, the innovators that we talk to, and, even those in the military, even the career service men and women that we've had on, they talk about the incremental progress of either their military career or the businesses and innovations that they've pursued. So what about the third time do you think made Emblem kind of click or kind of take off or become a more permanent occupation for you?
Yeah, a couple aspects that I think made the difference. On this third time around, I didn't try to do it alone. And I think that was a big difference of, like, from the start, I tried to build a team and really have it be more than just a one-man show. So the sooner you can have some other people is a force multiplier. You cannot do everything yourself. You're not going to be a one-man show. It's certainly easier like not have the complexities of people and other things, but you won't go very far. And that was what I painfully learned kind of the first couple times around. The other side is just frankly building on lessons learned of like, well, understanding the market more, understanding the landscape more of the supply chain, seeing where there are some inefficiencies that we could maybe kind of plant a foothold. All of that being said, though, I would say that the other aspect that is always the sort of like, your plan won't ever survive first contact with the enemy. That absolutely holds true. Like what we're doing now is not at all what we started doing, and it wasn't that like 3 years ago, right? Like it's a constant poke, prod, see what works, analyze it, adjust, innovate it, and move ahead. But there has to be some evolution. If I see people get really married to their first idea,
like a business plan.
Yeah, and it's like you just got to get it out there and see what people see what actual customers have to say about it.
So I want to pivot to your LinkedIn videos because you hit on something that I think is really interesting. You talked about the inefficiencies, and one of the videos that you do on LinkedIn talks about the value of business is in its efficiencies. And for those who are either watching or they're listening for the first time, you post, I guess, routinely a couple of videos a week talking about entrepreneurship or your personal and professional development. And I think a lot of these lessons learned come from Emblem Athletic and your experience after the military. And that was, I think, how I originally found you. I was like, man, these videos are great. They're digestible. They're uplifting, and they're pretty concise, right? They're very easily digestible. And so I want to start out with this first one. I have a few I want to ask you about.
Sure.
But the first one is, why do you talk about the value of a business being in its efficiencies?
So I think there's sort of this, especially with the understanding, the more widespread understanding of like venture capital and Shark Tank and like what's an investable business, everything else. And when you talk about investable businesses and like massive growth, it comes back to like making sure that you can do something at scale. Yeah. And that's okay. That is a path that you can pursue if you're trying to build, some sort of massive business. But sometimes that's not necessarily, the end all be all to what you're doing. And I think about, for Emblem in particular, we're in, the apparel business, but I've never sold an Emblem t-shirt. Not once have I ever sold something that somebody bought because it said Emblem. Like the easiest way that I could sell, the easiest way operationally is if I just, people say like, I'm going to start a brand, and it's going to be Emblem, or I'm going to start this new brand. It's going to be the next Under Armour. Okay, maybe, but I'm providing a service. And so no one's ever bought shirts from us because it said Emblem. They bought shirts from us because we've said, we'll put what's important to you on that shirt. I don't care if you're a 3-man team or a 300-man team or a 3,000 person organization. We'll make custom stuff for you. Now, that's terribly inefficient. It's a mess. When we say we have no minimums or anything else, it's just because nobody wants to do the work. The more I understood about the business, when companies say, oh, we have a 24 person minimum, that's just because they don't want to deal with the mess of doing less than 24, right? But if it's down to on the military side of things, if it's a platoon or it's a squad, that's the real intense emotional connection people have with who they're a part of. So I want to do stuff for them, but that's not efficient. If you looked at Emblem and tried to say like, let's make this the most efficient as possible, we'd say, well, just make one shirt and try to sell it to everybody. And instead we've done the opposite. We've made 275,000 different shirts.
Wow.
And so the problem with that, dude, and we're facing it right now. If I dial in and get 99% of those right, that's 2,750 people who are like, those guys suck. They screwed up my shirt. Yeah, it's because it's hard. but that's again part of, I think part of what can make a business successful is doing things that aren't efficient. It's building connection. It's driving, it's driving real results and in something different that you're not going to find any other place. I am not worried about Amazon
Hmm.
competing with my business.
Can I ask you? So I want to ask you about Mike Math, and
Sure.
I want to ask you about today's business superpower as well. But
Yeah.
before I ask you about these individual topics, let me take a step back real quick and ask you, where your ideas come from shooting, and what the process is of like of going about coming up with these ideas and rehearsing the ideas and talking about them, and kind of where you
Yep.
get your inspiration from.
Sure. And I told you this is gonna be fun to talk about. And I'm gonna make an on-the-spot recommendation for another veteran that you need to connect with.
Great. I always
So
take those.
he's
I
a
always take those.
so I really don't actually. Another friend of mine connected me with a guy named Rich Cardona.
Mm.
Rich runs a service that does LinkedIn branding and stuff like that. And so Rich and I met. Rich and I have very little like shared personal experience other than the fact that Rich was in the Marines.
Hmm.
And we connected over that. And then the stories kind of start like untangling, and it finds out he's married to a West Point grad who I know, like, but it's just that shared sort of like camaraderie that you have naturally. And so anyway, the format that I do for these videos is to me pretty, this is efficient. I do all of that in about 3 hours once a quarter.
Okay. That's
And
pretty.
that's it.
That's pretty impressive.
That is it. There is no script to it. Rich and I sit down for about 3 hours, and the concept is, if I were gonna hang out with you for coffee, and we had like an hour or 2 hours to talk about, that's the stuff that I would talk about.
Right.
Right? Like that's what we would talk about, whether it's personal life, whether it's business stuff, whether it's the mix of both. And so I've missed getting to sit down with people, over the last year because of coronavirus. Like I love here in Columbus, Ohio. I love getting together with anybody, that's building a business or interested in building a business, or people know that if you're getting out of the military and you happen to be moving to Columbus, it's like, oh, connect with Mike. He'll hang out with you for an hour, and you guys get coffee and talk about it. It doesn't matter. Like that's to me a great way of giving back, right? And continuing to try to help people. And so that's the only reason why I do the videos. It's almost like coffee with Mike at scale, right? Because it's in many ways an unfair advantage. You know a lot more about me than I know about you,
Yeah.
but you've kind of gotten the chance to get to know me through those videos over the last, couple months that I've been doing them. So that's really the mindset behind it. Is like, I'm going to continue to put that out there, because I know that there's some people I wouldn't be able to sit down with for an hour and share the painful lessons that I've learned along the way.
Yeah. No, that's funny. I kept thinking in my head, like, I wonder, if he has a lot of this. I think so. I think some people who create content, not everyone. I think
Yeah.
some people who create content, the content just comes out of them. It's like some artists, they just ooze music, right? They just create music all the time. Like, somebody who comes to mind is Leon Bridges. I love listening to Leon Bridges. I feel like every time I go to Leon Bridges, either social media pages or I go to his Spotify, there's a new song from like a month ago, and I'm like, this guy just lives for music, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, is Mike just one of those guys where he just has like lessons that he just like has to get this he has to share his ideas, and he has to encourage people? And are you writing this stuff down constantly because you're like, I got to get ready, I got to share this?
No, there's two things. So one, like that the scarf story.
Yeah.
I completely forgot. Like that hasn't even risen up yet. So like that'll make a great LinkedIn video. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a ton of that stuff. The one thing, and this perhaps will tie into the humor side of things. there is one thing that I do keep track of, and I have a Trello board that's a terrible like mess of random ideas from Mike.
Yes,
Like,
random ideas. Yeah, that's what I was interested in.
and so whenever I have an idea that I'm worried about losing, it's usually not like an idea for a LinkedIn video. Sometimes I put them in there, but I have a Trello board for my Army Navy pranks. So I do an Army Navy prank every year. It was very self-serving. It was part of the way I kind of got out of my own funk, and then other people liked it, and then I was like, all right, I'll just keep doing these. Um, I have a Trello board of Army Navy pranks planned out for the next like 20 years. Like like I've come up with more that I can do, and now I'm like getting into like next level. Like how can I create one that would like be perpetual so that like it keeps happening after I'm dead? Like, I mean, that kind of like really long range
Still
stuff.
playing pranks on us in 2075.
Correct. So I do systemize that with, I use Trello. I burn through notebooks. Everyone's got their own like sort of like handwritten solution. I burn through them real quick. I'll write stuff down there, but like if I put it on the Trello board, then at least it can move around and float around a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think writing down the ideas you have is I think it's an important aspect, whether it's just kind of goofing off or it is a way to put your thoughts on paper. And I think for, as a businessman or, somebody who's just getting out of the military, to be able to kind of like process what they're thinking, it's certainly something I do. I spend time maybe in a different format than you do, but writing stuff down in the morning, journaling in the morning after I read, and it's something that it's cathartic for me, but I think it's also good for business. As you talked about, it's good for branding, it's good for content, and sometimes it can be good just for good for goofing around during the Army Navy game. But I want to go back to your LinkedIn video. So I have to have you explain to the audience what Mike Math is.
Sure. If you are about to embark on anything truly entrepreneurial, where it's going to be make or break, right? Like I gotta use this to pay the bills. You'll start to have to do Mike Math, which is the sort of like the like rough, just running calculations that go in the back of your head of like, all right, what kind of revenue do I have coming in this month, and what bills am I going to pay, and what bills am I going to maybe pay next month because I can move this around, or can I talk to this person and see if they'll take half pay? And like you will never have enough money. If you have enough money, you've done something wrong. Like you've raised too much money, and it shouldn't be sitting around. You should not be comfortable
sitting on capital. Yeah.
Sitting on capital. And Mike Math is how I kind of leave us on the edge. And so I used to think, and I had a terrible kind of mindset at the beginning of like, well, once we get over this first like hump, then we'll be in the clear, right? Like, hey, I'm going to climb this one obstacle, and then there's going to be no more obstacles the rest of the way. It's just continuous obstacles, right? Like we're a multi-million-dollar company now, and I'm still solving this. Like I'm still solving this because we're still growing, and we're still trying to figure out what the right balance is, and that won't change. That means that we're growing. That means that we're kind of pushing things ahead. So the Mike Math is how I explain it to my CFO, who wants to put everything in in structure,
box a little bit,
in boxes. And I think if you're not comfortable with juggling things a little bit, you're gonna have to face the fact that maybe it's not for you. It is a part of any entrepreneurial effort. It is juggling all of that.
So let me ask you about this, if we can pause kind of on this.
Of course.
Getting over the hurdle and then feeling like there's going to be no more hurdles, because I think that is, especially getting out of the military, I think veterans experience that. Okay, I got over the hurdle, I got into school, I got my first job, I'm good. How do you maintain your desire to get up and keep running the business when you're like, okay, I know there's going to be another hurdle, and then there's going to be another hurdle, and then there's going to be another hurdle? what is the thing that keeps you going and keeps you energized to continue to pursue the growth of your business, or that a veteran can say, I may have a different, my hurdles may look different than Mike's, but I can still use the processes that he uses to continue to grow his business.
I think that's the like the unspoken rule of life that like our parents never told us, right? Like everyone kind of went through the like, oh, I'm done with high school. It's all easy here on out. Or like, hey, we got married. Marriage is gonna be super easy here on out. It's like, no, it's like everything in life is work. And just because it's work doesn't mean that it's not great. Right? Like we work on our life, we work on business, we work on our relationships to make them better and to make them, more fulfilling. And there's a couple, there's some like mantras that you have to say of like this is good. I love this stuff. Like when we are facing hard times at Emblem, I'm having a good time. I'm having fun with it. They like they say, these are the fun problems to solve. Like, oh my God, we grew too much and we outstripped our supply chain. We got to figure out how to catch up on orders. Like, all right, let's get our heads down and let's figure it out. So, it's no different. And again, to someone who's not in the entrepreneurial space, it's not like you're not going to face challenges. No one has an easy life. And that's just, I think that's part of human nature.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up though, because I do think it is easy for Dan Hamilton in 2011 or 2012. If I would be listening to your conversation about you running a business, I might think there are no correlations, there are no similarities. But I hope when those who are either in the armed forces trying to see what the other side is going to look like, they can recognize though that even our station in life may be looking a little different, or we may be on different paths, that same like, hey, there are going to be constant hurdles over a long period of time, but if you can keep your head down, if you can keep good people around you, which is something I think that you keep having that good, really that social support network, obviously very important in a business too, to make sure you run your business with good people. But it does translate to somebody who's getting out and is on campus somewhere. And they're like, I used to think that all the time. Like, now I'm done with this test, I can relax a little bit. There's another one coming in like 3 weeks, so I better keep studying.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you this analogy, and it's probably going to sound really depressing, but it's not to me. But this is what another friend of mine who also owns some businesses, he and I talk about. You are permanently like stuck on the railroad tracks, and there is a train that's about to crush you. All right, like there's a train coming, it's about to crush you. If you're in the corporate world, you're usually looking the other way, right? Like, and that is what happened to me. Like, I came into work one day, and then they're like, "Thanks for playing. You're you're fired." And then I'm like, oh man, I just got hit by a train. As an entrepreneur, I'm just facing the other way. It's not any easier. If you're leaving corporate world because you're like, oh, I want to be my own boss, that's a terrible expectation to have, that like, oh, it's so much easier. Entrepreneur, I'm looking at the train that's barreling down at me and is about to hit me. And like, occasionally I can like sidestep out of the way and just get clipped by it, like, and lose an arm or something. Like, it's painful. Like it just sucks, but I at least do have a little bit more control over things on my own. And so I do encourage people, if you have something you're interested in doing, there's never been an easier time to just set it up on the side, Shopify, or write a book, or do anything just to have something else out there, because the train's coming. Something's gonna run you over at some point.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great segue into the next question I had for you or the next video that really kind of struck me was today's business's superpower being resilience.
There's no other way other than to just continue to I don't put this up just for, just for West Point branding. Like I remind myself of that all the time, that like you have to keep pushing forward to win. And it's not going to be easy, and there are going to be setbacks, and there's going to be failures. That's part of proof that you're doing well. We faced our first lawsuit this year. And my friend was like, "Hey, you've really made it now that people are suing you, thinking that you've got money to to share with them." And I used to think that stuff would, like if I just jumped ahead to that, like those would be really crushing things. But now I just, you just kind of have to realize, like, it's just keep moving forward, and doing what's right.
Yeah, I think resilience too is what makes success, right? Because resilience is going over those hurdles every single day. Resilience isn't a lack of hurdle. It is figuring out how to have the muscle endurance to push through those hurdles.
Yeah. If you're not feeling challenged, something else should be raising concern, right? Like if it's too easy, maybe that train's just about to hit you.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
well, let me ask you this. I appreciate you sharing your not only your business story, your growth story, your entrepreneurial spirit, but also really being candid about your transition out of the military and what that experience was like for you. Was there anything today that we didn't get to hit on that you would like to leave our audience with?
I think kind of going back to some of the first portions of our conversation, that I know for me, it took a lot to sort of grasp the fact that my service didn't live up to what my expectations were. And that's just something that I can't control. And so I can continue to go off and do other things to serve, but will I ever have, the story of a military career that I thought I did? No. And that shouldn't stop me from being proud of my service, being proud of continuing to serve. And so I do want to leave sort of the audience with that message of, if you signed up to serve, great. That's it. That's all that matters. And for those that didn't serve but are working with people who've served, like, their service experience it can vary, right? So like, it's not all Hollywood, American Sniper, type stories. Like, there's a lot of people that have served that probably don't talk about it because they're in the same situation I'm in, where it's like, there's really not much to say. Like, I signed up for a couple of years. I moved some paperwork around. I did some vehicle accident investigations. Then I called it a day. But it's still, I think there's those characteristics of traits of service that kind of carry forward with everybody. So really, really happy to share my story. And then again, perhaps, just to, if it's not already clear, I'm open to helping out anybody that's got questions about entrepreneurship, service transition. Find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Mike, it was a great conversation. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
On behalf of Chairman George P. Bush and our dedicated staff at the Texas Veterans Land Board, we will see you back here next week.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.